Hi everyone. Haven't been back for a little while with book reviews. I've got so many films and a few other ideas that I want to do in the new year. So I thought I'd better get back to you. And because it's been Christmas, I don't know about you, but often you visit the in-laws and we have a farm that we go to. And really the only thing you can do is read, which I love. So I was able to finish a book, pick up another book and read that entire book and start a new one. So I've got two books today, which normally doesn't happen. Normally I review one book and then we go on to the next. So I'm going to cram two together and then tell you what I'm now reading. So the last time I spoke to everyone about books, I said I was about to start reading Man Booker Prize winner George Saunders' Lincoln in the Bardo, which is George Saunders, as I think I mentioned, known as the best epithet you can have, the writer's writer, and that was because he had not done many long form novels. He mainly specialized in short stories and written for various magazines, and they had all been viewed as just these little gems. And the most probably famous, his last collection, big one, was 10th of December, and I've got that and I've read it. And I was a little bit underwhelmed. It wasn't that, obviously he could write and he could construct a sentence, but it wasn't like it grabbed me like some authors do. And so I was very interested when this won, the Man Booker, because sometimes, I look at the long list, then I look at the short list, and I wanted this to win. And one of the reasons was because I always read the winner of the Man Booker. And I thought, wow, this will give me an excuse to put it to the top of my list and to dive in. And so I was really disappointed with this novel. So what he's done is, just briefly, Lincoln in the Bardo. Bardo is a Buddhist term. George Saunders is a Buddhist, and it's when your soul hasn't moved on to the afterlife. And it's the famous story of Abraham Lincoln, whose son is around 11 years old and dies of like pneumonia. It's not quite clear. And Willie Lincoln, and the president who is dealing with the American Civil War, is overcome with grief and revisits the boy's body in a crypt just outside Washington for about the next 3 days until he's buried. And I just thought, wow, that is even just when I tell you that story, you go, wow, there's so much that you could talk about, the juxtaposition of a young life going just when a president is ordering so many young people to give their life for their country. And so what Saunders does is he creates this very strange, it really quite revolutionary way of telling a novel. And I think this is crucial, is that if you think that this experiment works, and the vast majority of critics, and obviously the Man Booker Prize jury did, then it's revolutionary and it's a different way of telling what could have been quite a traditional story. And that is that at constant times throughout the whole book, there's like a Greek chorus of all the other spirits who, for whatever reason, are trapped in the Bardo and haven't moved on, and are looking after Willie and other spirits. And in their conversations, you glean why they're trapped there and why they haven't been able to move on. And also they take on these little idiosyncrasies about themselves, which are emblematic of why they couldn't move on in the first place. And so what you will get is just pages and pages of 20, there's three main spirits, but there's hundreds of them who'll be commenting on what is happening. It is very rare you get even a full paragraph. When he does switch to larger pieces of writing, it's often will be quoting journals and other historical documents from the time. We'll just be talking about how Lincoln looked, how everyone loved the sun, that kind of thing. Very rare in this book that you'll get more than 2-3 pages of prose. And when I got to those, that was like an oasis. I just drank them because finally you could see some structured writing. And at those times, I quite enjoyed the book. But overall, I felt like I was just shuffling through this landscape, and the whole structure, the whole idea of the spirits commenting on everything, and also there's quite a few clumsy parts where it's almost suggested that at one point, if you're inhabited by a spirit, it can kind of go in your body and try and move you, and it's very hard to do so. But when they do so, they might be able to, if they use enough psychic energy, give you a feeling, or enough of a semblance of a feeling so that you might change your mind. And it's suggested at one point that maybe it is because of this that the president emancipates slaves, which kind of seems to me very hokey and kind of stupid, since we already know the Civil War's underway. Civil War was to emancipate the slaves, so just did not work for me at all. Okay, the next book I picked up is The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. And the reason this got on my list, I always have a pile of about 10 books in a reading list, yards long. The reason why this jumped to the top of the pile was two reasons. One was I listened to a podcast called Law, and in it they talked about a serial killer named H.H. Holmes. Now, I've always had a fascination with serial killers, and if you've seen me talk about TV on this channel, one of my favorite shows this year was Mindhunters on Netflix. And this one captured my attention because it was so strange that you often hear about serial killers, but this guy built a murder castle, torture castle, depending on which book you read, and in which he was totally built for his specifications to murder mainly young women, but really anyone who got in his way or he could make a profit by. So that was really strange. So this book is about that, but it's also about the establishment and the way in which Chicago built the World Fair in 1893 to 5. And so it's really all about the various group of intellectuals and architects, landscape artists, led by, I think, David Burnham. And what they do there is they bring together all, you can imagine it's a big deal that Chicago beats New York to get the World Fair. It's following Paris, which has outshone everyone in civilization, and the crown and glory being the Eiffel Tower. And what are the Americans going to do, and all the disasters and everything you think. Now, the problem with this is, that's an interesting story. It's probably a pretty thin story. The H.H. Holmes stuff is very interesting, but it's actually a pretty thin story because we don't actually know that much. And one of the problems with the H.H. Holmes parts is he has to speculate wildly. And for a non-fiction book, you get into a little bit of trouble there. You really have two books here, and they've been fused together. I'm not sure if he made that decision or if he went, I've got about 150 pages of good material that's not going to cut it for a book. I'm going to have to find a link. And really the World Fair and H.H. Holmes, sure, he operated in Chicago during that time, but that is about it. And what I found was, as much as I wanted to learn about these things, and that's the great thing about picking up a non-fiction book about a subject you don't know that much about, every time I was waiting and waiting to get to the H.H. Holmes chapters, which were much more interesting, and it's a serial killer, he's a strange guy, and it's all horrible as per usual. And that's not a good thing. If there are two stories and I really only just want to get to one, really the end conclusion is I should just read a book about H.H. Holmes. So it's not that the guy can't write, but I will tell you one thing which I did found odd is, when you read a non-fiction book, it is normally, especially in the middle, packed with like 20, 30 pages of illustrations, photographs, who's who, all this kind of stuff. And I thought, wow, with this cast of characters, even if you just did the World Fair part, that would have so much documentation. And then the H.H. Holmes would still be interesting to see. Very few pictures, and that really, took a little bit of the shine off this. So really can't recommend it too highly. Oh, the other reason, apart from the podcast on law, was Scorsese, who is one of my most favorite filmmakers of all time. Leonardo DiCaprio has bought the rights to this book, and the rumor is they're going to make a movie. And I could see DiCaprio will play Holmes, and he's this blue-eyed, beautiful, charming kind of guy. He'll be great for it. And I thought they could really... and there won't be too much about the World Fair, I suspect. So that was that. So 2 books which, not great. No disasters by any means. I mean, I think Lincoln and the Bardo is probably the most celebrated book of the year, almost. I mean, with other heady company. And The Devil in White City won the National Book Award for non-fiction, and lots of fans there. So I'd say I'm a little bit out of kilter. Now, I came back, and as I said, I got this huge book pile, and I kind of, every now and again, I just go and buy something, and jumps a list which is probably 20 years old. And the reason I bought this book, which I'm about to show you, is I'd heard about a fantasy book, and as you all know, fantasy is the genre I love the most, even though I'm most disappointed by it. But I'd heard someone had written a fantasy story and crossed it with the tropes of a gangster book. And it's like, and they're saying it's like a magic world, but The Godfather. Now, let's not get into The Godfather. It's just, 2 of my top 5 films of all time. So I weakened when I got back and thought, well, this would be a great summer book for here. I'm in Sydney, Australia. It's about 50,000 degrees outside. Cicadas everywhere. I'm sweating, and I'm going to buy a big old fantasy saga. And this is number 1 of the Greenbone saga, Jade City by Fonda Lee. I'm reading it now. It seems like if you think of a Japanese gangster film so far, but you get special powers and kind of like a magic from the use of jade. And jade is this elusive super mineral, be like, uranium or something. It's really hard to get, harder to hold, and people have worked out a way to give themselves special powers using it. Just started reading. I'll let you know next time, and I'll talk to you very soon because I want to do some wrap-ups for 2017. So, as usual, if you enjoy this stuff, please subscribe. If you hit the bell, you'll know every time I put up new material. And I'm on I'm on Twitter at Guru Eden, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.